Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, Governor Rauner delivers his State of the State address. Then in about 30 minutes from now, House Speaker Michael Madigan responds to the governor's State of the State address. Following that, in about 50 minutes from now, House Minority Leader Jim Dunkin and Senate Minority Leader Christine Radogno react to the governor's State of the State address. Then in about 1 hour and 10 minutes from now, State Representative Kenneth Dunkin remarks on Governor Rauner's State of the State address and speaks out against House Speaker Michael Madigan for being guilty of, in Representative Dunkin's own words, holding the citizens of Illinois hostage over the state budget negotiations. And finally, in about 1 hour and 30 minutes from now, from the City Club of Chicago, State Senate President John Cullerton delivers an address entitled Funding Our Schools, Time for a Turnaround. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our Advisory Council members.
Hi, I'm Delitso Solomoyo, President of the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies. We are an organization of 36 member agencies located around Illinois which provide needed services to our fellow citizens. It may be helping provide services at a homeless shelter, or helping to provide affordable utilities to low-income people across Illinois through such programs as the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, better known as LIHEAP, or working with rural communities and helping them maintain needed community infrastructure. These are just a few of the many services provided by Illinois' community action agencies. But to provide these services efficiently and effectively, we need solid information. That's why, in addition to heading the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies, I am also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. I have watched the Illinois Channel for years. It provides serious coverage of the Illinois legislature, public policy discussions, and one-on-one interviews with leaders from across Illinois. It's the kind of solid, in-depth information all of us need to get beyond partisan politics and political spin and just hear directly what's happening, what's being proposed, and why. I know and you know that Illinois is filled with good people. But if we are to have good, effective public policies, we need to base those on good information. We get that from the Illinois Channel. That's why I watch it, and I hope you will too. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next, from Springfield, Governor Rauner delivers his State of the State address.
Today we're gathered to discuss our great state of Illinois, our opportunities, our challenges, our goals for the future. We were all elected to do a job. Our job is to improve the quality of life for all the people of Illinois. That means more economic opportunity, to increase real incomes for all families, higher pay and lower cost of living for everyone. The key to that is excellent education and vocational training combined with multiple career opportunities made available by companies competing to hire workers. Illinois is a wonderful place. Our people, our work ethic, our sense of community, our dedication to helping each other, our commitment to giving back, absolutely extraordinary. It's what makes our state a great place to live. We have the hardest working people in America. We have the best strategic location of any state, the most fertile fields, best agriculture. We are the heart of transportation in America. We have the commercial capital of the Midwest, the heart of America in Chicago. We were the manufacturing center of America, and we've had much of the best infrastructure in the country. We have the ability to lead the nation in growth and opportunity. And instead, jobs and people have been leaving our state. And we watch other states emerge from the Great Recession, while our employment and growth stagnates. We have fewer jobs today than we had at the turn of this century. Our average working family is making less than they were 8 years ago. We are virtually tied for the highest property taxes in America, and we have far more layers of government and mountains of debt at every level. Unfortunately, Illinois' economy has been split in two, one part with modest growth and the other part in decline. There are areas within 90 minutes of O'Hare Airport that compete with other expensive megacities around the world. Thanks to global transportation infrastructure, first-class universities, and world-class cultural amenities, white-collar communities in the Chicago area have mostly been able to overcome the financial mismanagement that is now strangling Chicago and Cook County. But it's difficult for the rest of the state. Harvey, Blue Island, Kankakee, Rockford, East Moline, Peoria, Decatur, Danville, Mount Vernon, Marion. These communities have to compete with other states like Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina. And too often, we've been losing. In recent years, we've lost more than 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Many of you have argued that we should not try to compete with other states, because that would be a race to the bottom. Well, the numbers prove otherwise. Factory workers in Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Tennessee, and South Carolina, when you adjust for the cost of living, now make more than workers in Illinois. That's unacceptable. Factory workers in Texas are now making more than Illinois workers, even without adjusting for the cost of living. That's outrageous. We should be kicking Texas' tail. But the numbers don't lie. We are losing the race for good-paying jobs. And as jobs have moved to other states, we have a smaller tax base and less money to invest in education, infrastructure, and quality of life here. Instead of letting Indiana and Texas take our workers, let's go compete and take their jobs. Illinois' existing policies were meant to help working people and the middle class, but are now having just the opposite effect. To see more people employed at high pay, we need to stop crushing employers. To create good jobs, we need more job creators. Now, I understand that union leaders and trial lawyers are putting pressure on you to keep the status quo. But if we don't offer a competitive environment for businesses, pretty soon the unions won't have any more jobs to unionize, and the trial lawyers won't have any more businesses to sue. All I'm asking for is a return to balance in this state. Because we don't have it now, we don't have competitive balance, and jobs are leaving. To bring good jobs to Illinois, we have to make Illinois a place where it's good to do business. We must fix our workers' comp system, labor regulations, liability costs, and property taxes that make us uncompetitive and push job creators out. The cost of workers' comp is the biggest factor driving our job losses. If we simply aligned our workers' comp costs with those of a state like Massachusetts, which is hardly a bastion of conservatism, we can save state and local taxpayers over $300 million a year while protecting those who suffer workplace injuries and grow more careers at higher wages. Let's get it done. One of the most critical ways to lower our cost of living and compete for more good jobs is to reduce our property tax burden. We have the second highest property taxes in the country. They're crushing homeowners and small business owners from one end of the state to the other. In many cases, people are paying more in property taxes over the course of living in their home than the original purchase price. That's ridiculous. The government should not be making more off a home than its owner. Last year, Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti led a bipartisan task force that identified 27 ways to streamline and reduce costs on local governments. It is a groundbreaking report and a roadmap for reform. Thank you, Evelyn, for your leadership. Now, I know some items in the report are easier to pass than others. So let's pass the easier ones first. We don't have to pass them all day one. We do need to get started on consolidation and mandate reduction right now. The families of Illinois are tired of waiting. To create true long-term property tax relief for our taxpayers, we've got to give local governments a way to control their costs. Some have said local control is impossible, and yet many in this chamber have embraced it before, voting repeatedly to give Chicago more control in its contracting and collective bargaining rules. We should not force other mayors and school boards to come to Springfield to beg for more control. Let's give local control now so homeowners can afford their houses and our communities can compete for jobs with neighboring states that have far lower property tax burdens. Reducing our tax burden is not only about taxpayers and their property taxes, it's also about citizens and their government. Like it or not, there's a serious deficit in public trust when it comes to government in Illinois. That's true, it's true, unfortunately. Citizens don't trust their government, and businesses don't either. We pay for this trust deficit in lost economic growth, victims of a widely held perception that everything in Illinois is lobbyist tested, special interest approved. We need to regain public trust. We need to restore employer confidence that Illinois is a safe place to do business, so they will invest more here, grow in more high-paying jobs, and expanding our tax base. That starts with fundamental changes, term limits, and redistricting reform. The people of Illinois deserve the chance to vote on term limits. The state Supreme Court made it clear that it takes legislative action to put term limits on the ballot. This is the year to make that happen. I was told last year that the legislature only takes up constitutional issues in years when we hold statewide elections. Well, I look forward to a vote on term limits this session. President Obama has come out strongly in favor of both term limits and redistricting reform. Just 2 weeks ago at his State of the Union address, President Obama pressed for nonpartisan redistricting reform, saying we have to end the practice of drawing our districts so that politicians can pick their voters and not the other way around. I agree, and the President and the people of Illinois agree. The only reasons not to do this are pure partisan politics and a desire to cling to power. The vast majority of all Illinois voters, Democrats and Republicans, are in overwhelming support of both term limits and redistricting reform. The time for excuses and blame is over. The time for action is now. Let's get it done. Change is hard. Reform is difficult. But we can't just raise taxes again. We know that doesn't work. While the 2011 tax hike was in place, our credit rating was downgraded 5 times. We barely made a dent in our bill backlog. State support for schools was cut. Our unfunded pension liabilities went up $28 billion, and our economic growth fell to half the national average. Raising taxes without improving our ability to compete will not help the people of Illinois, and in fact, it will make things worse. While all of us are continuing to negotiate over reforms to grow jobs and lower our taxes, our administration is not waiting to take action. We are moving ahead to make government more effective and provide our taxpayers with major long-term savings. Let's review some of our actions. Over the past year, we eliminated more than $500 million in state spending through department action and began the process of getting out from under our 80 consent decrees that have accumulated from decades of mismanagement. We reformed the EDGE program to eliminate special deals and now only provide credits for job creation. We banned the revolving door of state officials turning lobbyists to make money off the programs they designed. We began a comprehensive review of Illinois police procedures and other states' best practices for handling use of deadly force between officers and community residents. We began the process to sell the Thompson Center. We implemented fraud reduction efforts that prevented $188 million in improper unemployment insurance claims. Under Director Felicia Norwood, we took action at HFS that will net state taxpayers more than $250 million, improving redetermination and right-sizing the entities providing care coordination. Thanks to the leadership of Director George Sheldon, DCFS is producing better outcomes for children while saving taxpayer money by moving more children from shelters to foster homes. These efforts by Directors Sheldon and Norwood are only the beginning of a complete transformation of the way we provide health and human services here in Illinois. Historically, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Historically, the state has spent most of its resources, tens of billions of dollars, on a broken patchwork of reactive, expensive, and ineffective interventions. After decades of such uncoordinated spending, Illinois residents are sicker and no better educated, while some of our most vulnerable communities suffer from unconscionable levels of unemployment, violence, and incarceration. Our transformation puts a strong new focus on prevention and public health, pays for value and outcomes rather than volume and services, makes evidence-based and data-driven decisions, and moves individuals from institutions to community care to keep them more closely connected with their families and communities. Now, I know many of you have been working on these issues for years. I ask for your support. Together, we can finally bring Illinois up to par with the best-run states, helping make us far more compassionate without dramatically increasing costs, and in some cases, reducing costs. One of our biggest taxpayer protection initiatives is to take on the compensation costs of our state government. Most of our state employees are terrific, hardworking public servants. They deserve to be well paid and receive higher compensation in the future. But it should be based in part upon higher productivity and shared benefit in taxpayer savings rather than just seniority. Unfortunately, the compensation demands being made by AFSCME leaders are out of touch with reality. Adjusted for the cost of living, we already have the highest paid state employees in America. Undeterred and unashamed, AFSCME is demanding $3 billion more in overall compensation. That $3 billion should go into our schools and human services, not into our government bureaucracy. Our state employees are paid almost 30% more than Illinois taxpayers are in their own jobs for the same work. That is just not fair. And it's time we restore balance between taxpayers and state government. And it's not just the eye-popping price tag on these easy-to-see costs that's hurting us. Taxpayers are also losing from the hidden costs of work rules buried in previous contracts. Because of these work rules, state government has seen AFSCME file grievances against volunteer campground hosts for educating visitors about a state park, against volunteers at a veterans home who answered calls in the reception area, against a supervisor who pitched in to eliminate a backlog of tax returns. That's not right. And unfair work rules have allowed state workers to manipulate overtime policies to boost their pay, costing taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. We've paid $22 million in overtime for the 15-minute roll call that occurs at the beginning of shifts. Our former Auditor General has also highlighted as ripe for abuse the practice of so-called shift swapping, where workers use sick time for a regular shift, but then get paid overtime to work a later shift that same day. We need to install common sense into our union contracts. One of our most critical actions we can take to save taxpayers billions of dollars while offering state workers a fair deal that protects their retirement is to enact constitutional pension reform. Nearly everyone in this chamber today understands the need for it. We have the worst unfunded pension liability in the nation, and because of that, nearly $1 in $4 we spend in this state budget goes towards making pension payments. Over the last 10 years, we've gone from contributing $1.4 billion a year, this year scheduled to pay $7.6 billion. Now, over the summer, our administration developed a pension plan that will provide more than $2 billion in relief to cities, counties, universities, and school districts, in addition to the state. And while it remains my hope that the General Assembly is interested in providing more comprehensive help to every community, we cannot wait any longer to help the state. So, as a first step toward bipartisan compromise, President Cullerton and I have agreed to support his pension proposal that will save $1 billion a year from 4 of the state pension plans. I have instructed administration attorneys to work with the Senate President's staff to finalize language as soon as possible. When they do, I urge both chambers to pass it without delay. One of the biggest impediments holding back our efforts to lower taxpayer costs and improve services is our antiquated information technology system. We are a model of inefficiency and ineffectiveness. Right now, Illinois ranks among the 3 highest spending states on IT, and that's not just recent, that's for years, but we are one of the worst states for digital services delivered to the public. Too many of our agencies' systems can't communicate with each other, they are vulnerable to cyber attacks, and are extremely expensive to maintain. Illinois state government needs a digital revolution, and this week I created a secretary-level position to see this mission through. The Department of Innovation and Technology will allow us to consolidate, modernize, and streamline our IT systems to better serve taxpayers and businesses while fostering innovation among employees. Current state CIO Hardik Bhatt is with us today. Hardik, where are you? Hardik, wave there. Hardik. Hardik will lead our transformation to improve service and productivity and allow Illinois to be more proactive in the quickly changing world of IT. Now, it's not just in IT where we need to make Illinois government faster and more responsive. Our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity is hampered by red tape and a slow bureaucracy that makes business development and job recruitment more difficult. Our other states have moved to public-private partnerships to boost economic development efforts, while Illinois has stood still. Last year, we introduced legislation to create a P3, but it stalled in the legislature. This year, we will move forward with a revised version that will laser focus on sales, marketing, and customer service to increase our competitiveness for job creation and investment. This morning, the Illinois Business and Economic Development Corporation filed articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State, the first step towards bringing our economic development efforts into the 21st century. In the days ahead, I will be signing an executive order formally establishing our collaboration. Now, to save taxpayers money, we must also change the way we buy our goods and services. In order to counter the procurement system abuses of prior governors, and we all know who they were, the General Assembly passed the 2009 Procurement Reform Law. Unfortunately, that law is creating far more problems than those it was designed to correct. The law more than tripled the time it takes to complete an RFP process, taking the process from 2 or 3 months to 9 to 12 months. The real solution is comprehensive procurement reform, both legislative and administrative, that maintains necessary ethics and transparency safeguards, streamlines bureaucracy, offers greater flexibility to agencies, and follows best practices from other states. Done properly, we believe this can save Illinois taxpayers more than $500 million a year. We look forward to working with this legislature to get that done. Now let's talk about one of the most significant transformations underway in our administration. Last year, we created a bipartisan commission led by our Director of Public Safety, Roger Heaton, to propose reforms to our criminal justice system. The commission earlier this month recommended 14 reforms that can help us achieve our goal of safely reducing the state's prison population by 25% by 2025. They recommended we enhance rehabilitation programming in our corrections system and implement risk, needs assessments, and evidence-based programs that target underlying issues that contribute to criminal behavior, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy and substance abuse treatment. These and other reforms will lead to fewer victims of crimes, a better pathway back for ex-offenders, and safer communities for all. State Senators Michael Connolly, Karen McConaughey, Michael Nolan, and Kwame Raoul, and Representatives John Cabello, Scott Drury, L.G. Sims, and Brian Stewart served on the Criminal Justice Reform Commission. Thank you all for your hard work on this critical issue. With your help, let's pass your recommendations into law this year. Finally, let's talk about the single most important thing we do together as a community, and that is educate our young people. I know each of you in this chamber share my passion to make Illinois schools the best in the nation. I'm excited to work together to make that a reality. We in Illinois are blessed with wonderful teachers. I want to thank the thousands of educators across our state for the excellent work they do each and every day for our sons and daughters. The key to rising family incomes, more high-paying jobs, and a better life for everyone in Illinois is to have a high-quality, fully integrated education system from cradle to career. From early education to K-12 public schools to outstanding community colleges and universities, all the way to coordinated job training and technical training later in life. To drive that result, we are committed to eliminating wasteful bureaucracy, putting more money into our classrooms, freeing up our teachers to teach, and holding our schools truly accountable for results. We have 10 long-term goals. This legislative session, we will begin. Number one, we want to work closely with President Cullerton to significantly increase state support for education, focusing our additional resources more on low-income and rural school districts so we can provide high-quality classrooms in every community without taking money away from other districts. Second, we've got to provide proper funding for early childhood education while setting rigorous benchmarks for program performance so we can continue to be national leaders in this important work. Third, we need to give school districts more flexibility when it comes to bargaining, contracting, and bidding to save taxpayers money while enabling districts to pay higher teacher salaries. Fourth, let's empower our universities and community colleges to reduce their administrative costs, their work rules, pension liabilities, unfunded mandates, and then offer additional financial support to those schools that show real progress in putting more resources in the classroom where it belongs. Let's support more partnerships between high schools, community colleges, and local employers so that our young people who are not going to university can receive the training to step into good-paying careers beginning in their teenage years. Sixth priority is to develop a comprehensive, consistent, objective student growth measure, not necessarily based in the PARCC system, so we can track our students' progress in each grade towards college or career, holding our schools accountable for results while eliminating unnecessary testing and bureaucratic mandates. Let's support programs that create more quality school choice options for low-income children stuck in failing schools. Let's create new quality schools of choice for our disconnected youth as a way to get them back in school. Let's consolidate, we can consolidate the majority of our councils and task forces under the P20 and early learning councils in order to decrease the bureaucracy, increase high-quality outcomes for our learners, and improve the coordination of these working groups. And finally, number 10, this year we'd like to create a cabinet on children and youth so we can better align our health and human services with our cradle-to-career education initiatives in order to provide higher quality, fully integrated services for our young people. Well, this education agenda is bold and transformative. Change is difficult. But by working together, we can make it a reality. The people of Illinois deserve nothing less than the best education system in America. Now, we all know, all of us in this chamber had a difficult year together in 2015 as we debated a budget with structural reform. But it is not too late for this General Assembly to make historic progress for the people of Illinois. We came together to solve a budget crisis early in 2015. We came together to improve our unemployment insurance system, benefiting employers and workers alike. We came together to pass historic criminal justice reforms and much-needed police reforms. If each of us commits to serious negotiation based on mutual respect for our co-equal branches of government, there's not a doubt in my mind we can come together to pass a balanced budget alongside reforms. If we work together, Illinois can be both compassionate and competitive. I'm convinced there is a way we can build the economic growth of states like Texas with the heart and compassion of states like Massachusetts. In fact, in deep blue Massachusetts, Democrats passed collective bargaining reform for local governments to save their taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. They figured out how to make workers' compensation costs half of ours. And they put in rigorous student growth measures to hold their schools accountable for results. Our job in this Capitol is to improve the lives of all the people of Illinois through more economic opportunity, better educational opportunity, and more value for their hard-earned tax dollars. To achieve a grand compromise, we must cast partisanship and ideology aside. We must break from the politics of the past and do what is right for the long-term future of the state. I'm ready. And it's my genuine hope that you are too. Let's continue this journey together. Illinois can't wait any longer. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And God bless our great state of Illinois. Thank you.
Next, from Springfield, House Speaker Michael Madigan responds to the governor's State of the State address.
Further questions? I have some opening remarks, and it's a follow-up to the governor's comments during his speech, where he talked in terms of accomplishments where there had been cooperation with the members of the legislature. And I'd like to highlight 4 of those areas and then make a point. Number 1, the governor talked in terms of record K through 12 spending, record spending for elementary and secondary education. Number 2, the governor talked in terms of the correction to the FY15 budget. 3, he talked in terms of landmark public safety legislation such as body cameras and other police reforms. And lastly, he talked in terms of unemployment insurance, which happened through what we call the agreed bill process. All of these things happened. All of these happened with cooperation with people in the legislature. And in each instance, please understand, The governor did not demand his program, which would lower wages for middle-class families and their standard of living and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. So again, these 4 areas happened. There was cooperation. Please note, at no time during the deliberation on these issues did the governor lay down his current demand that his program be enacted, a program which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. Okay, questions? Well, I think it's interesting that you make the point that the governor's speech did not deal with the fact that there is no budget for the current fiscal year. It's very interesting that the governor would come before a joint session of the General Assembly speaking to the state of the state of Illinois and decline to comment that we don't have a full budget for this particular fiscal year. I certainly would have appreciated it had he done that, had he offered some comment as to why that hasn't happened.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think of the governor saying how non-competitive Illinois is versus other states?
Well, that's the governor's program, which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. That's his program.
How was this first year compared with all the other governors you've watched, Mr. Speaker?
I found it very interesting
In what respect?
in a lot of respects.
The governor is characterizing this as an olive branch, open door, conciliation. Did you hear a hand extended? Did you hear notes of conciliation in this speech?
You may recall at the time of the legislative inauguration in January of 2015, I pledged to work cooperatively with Governor Rauner. I pledged to work with him cooperatively and professionally, and I've renewed that pledge on several occasions, including today. So I stand ready to work on any problem facing the government of the state of Illinois. And I would say again that where we've come together and worked together without the governor's demand that we enact his program, which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families, that we've accomplished a great deal.
But did you find the governor's speech cooperative and reasonable? Did you find the language in the speech that he used cooperative and reasonable?
I found it very interesting. I followed every word in his speech. And you do know that we are in continuous session, don't you?
What did you make about his attacks on Democratic allies, on labor and absentee being paid too much, and it also brought up trial lawyers and what do you do with them?
My goal is to work professionally and cooperatively with the governor. We have some very serious problems, as these people have spoken to. You heard the comments of the people that are standing behind me. These are very serious problems. They all relate to budget making, to the continuing deficit of the state of Illinois, and that's what we ought to address. We ought to get busy, sit down. What can we do to solve this budget problem? I've said consistently that what we need to do is some cuts in state spending, such as Senate Bill 788, which would have reduced the Medicaid program by $400 million. But at the same time, I've said publicly that I would be prepared to support more taxes on the wealthy. I'm prepared to do that. But it's got to be a balanced approach.
People said you need a supermajority to pass a tax on your own. You said just now that your supermajority is...
His statement that the Democrats on their own would pass a tax increase is just not realistic. It just doesn't bear scrutiny here in the Capitol. But you're here quite a bit, you know that.
Speaker, there were a lot of people on the Republican side of the aisle clapping throughout the speech, but there was one of your members also joining them, Representative Dunkin. Do you have anything to say about that? And does that speak to your supermajority not being as strong as some believe?
You know, this is America, and we still have freedom in this country, and people are free to applaud when they want to applaud and not applaud when they don't want to applaud.
So you don't have as much control as...
I don't have as much control as certain people in the media have claimed for years.
Why is he allowed to caucus still? Well, why is Ken Dunkin allowed in your caucus?
That's a good question.
Are you thinking about not letting that happen?
I just think it's a good question.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
What's the answer?
excuse me, now, we've had a little bit from
But
you.
I talked to you about CPS
Sure.
and the plan that the Republicans proposed and
Yeah.
taking over and
Yeah.
perhaps bankruptcy and I have a follow-up.
Yeah. Well, number one, I read a summary of the bills that would provide for the bailout of the Chicago school system. I haven't had a chance to really analyze the bills and to fully appreciate how they would work and what the impact would be. But I do find it very interesting that the governor and his Republican allies in the legislature are proposing a bailout of the Chicago school system.
Would that be a good idea to take over for the state?
Well, that's what I'd like to have some time before I can render a judgment, but it clearly would be a bailout.
You've met with Pierre Lewis privately, I've been told. How did that go, and where do you see the CPS contract and CTE going?
They're in bargaining today. They've been in bargaining for several weeks. The latest reports are that the current bargaining appears to be done in good faith on both sides. They're attempting to move to an agreement which would provide for an extension of the contract. I don't know all of the details, and I'm clearly not in a position to be commenting on what's being discussed in collective bargaining.
Speaker, can you address, speaking of education, the governor proposed withholding state dollars if there's not cost savings, or maybe giving state dollars to the person if there are cost savings? Can you address that?
Well, our interest is in the state budget making, and in the spring and in May, we adopted a state budget that would have provided support for all elements of education, from elementary and secondary through high school, community colleges, the universities. We're really not in the position to be commenting on the governor's remarks of today.
What about the P3 that he's talking about? There was an agreement, you guys kind of altered the agreement.
Well, there are numerous groups that work to improve education. They should all be lauded, and they do good work. And from time to time, there are proposed changes in the composition and the arrangement of these groups. We should just maintain an open mind on that. The important point is there are so many Illinoisans that are willing to volunteer to improve the quality of education and the quality of instructions that we ought to bring them in and work with them. The governor talked in terms of working again with President Cullerton, which is a good thing, in the area of education. And I would like to point out that in the House, we've had a bipartisan group chaired by the Majority Leader, Representative Curry, for several months. And it's bipartisan. We've reached out to every member of the House, regardless of where their district is located, regardless of their political party. And our goal is to do a real good study of the school aid formula and the total method of distribution of the school money, with a view toward where we can correct inadequacies, where we can correct deficiencies, and just do a much better job where the state is called upon to support education, especially at the level of elementary and secondary education.
You talked about a tax on the wealthy. Is that the millionaire's tax, or do you want to expand that? Because that doesn't seem like it would be anywhere near enough to fill the budgetary gap that Illinois is facing right now.
Well, it's all part of my position, which you've heard on several occasions, which I don't think you can simply cut your way out of the budget problem. I think you need a balanced approach. You need cuts such as Senate Bill 788, which would have cut a K program by $400 million, and you need new revenue. And in terms of finding new revenue, I've said consistently that I'm prepared to negotiate with the governor, but I do believe that as part of a revenue package that we ought to have increased taxes on the wealthy of Illinois.
Speaker, what have you offered anything in exchange? Because a lot of people criticize your position that you're not giving up anything and you're expecting the governor to come all the way to your position. Yeah. Would you say whether that's true? And number two, if I might, before any of this is resolved, we might have any number of social service agencies that are permanently out of business, some schools collapse. Would you be willing to move a funding bill? Because the only two groups that are really getting slammed by this standoff are social service agencies and higher education. Would you move a bill to fund those so that they don't go out of business in the meantime?
To quote one of our witnesses, you'll recall that the legislature in May passed the complete budget. And that budget would have provided funding for these areas.
In fact, it doesn't help now.
And I'm sure you know that under the Illinois Constitution, the governor is given great veto power. So number one, he can exercise a complete veto. Number two, he can do a reduction veto in the area of appropriations. Number three, he can do a line item veto in the area of appropriations. When the governor got that budget in May, he could have exercised all of those powers under the Constitution. He could have refashioned that budget to his liking, and he would have been in a position to continue support for the agencies of the people that are standing behind
If
him.
he did not do that, we would move a bill to fund these people to keep them viable until the standoff is worked out.
Now, let me address your question about meeting the governor halfway, because we have done that. As an example, the governor spent a lot of time today talking about workers' compensation. And what he means is he wants to reduce the benefit level in workers' compensation. He wants to send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. The House has passed a workers' compensation bill. We've done changes in the system. We acknowledge there are changes that could be done in the workers' compensation system, and they ought to be done. The House bill also provided for rate regulation of the insurance companies that sell workers' compensation insurance. There have been studies in the last few months, they're acknowledged, they're agreed to, that the cost of workers' compensation in Illinois has come down since 2011. But the rates charged for the insurance have not come down. To me, that says we ought to do rate regulation of insurance companies selling workers' compensation insurance in Illinois, as is done in a majority of the states in the country. That's number one. Number two, the governor talked in terms of wanting to privatize the operation of the Illinois Economic Development Agency, which is the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The House passed a bill working with the governor. We worked with him. We exchanged ideas. We negotiated. We gave him what he wanted. We put one item in there that he didn't agree to, which was what we call a 3-year sunset, which would be an automatic review of what would be happening under privatization of this agency. Privatization has happened all over the country. The results are a mixed bag. In Wisconsin, under Governor Scott Walker, there was a huge scandal where the governor was the chair of the board taking campaign contributions from companies getting benefits from the board. The scandal was such that the governor had to resign from the board and move new legislation to remove the governor from the board. These agencies are a mixed bag. And so my request was, Governor, we'll give you what you want, but 3 years from now, let's do an automatic review to see if it's working. If it's not working, then we'll move in a different direction. Governor talked in terms of reducing property taxes. In the House, we've called legislation that would freeze property taxes 17 times. 17 times. On all 17 occasions, about 40 Democrats voted for the bill. Close to 0 Republicans. So if the governor wanted a freeze in property taxes, he could have instructed the House Republicans to support this bill, be over in the Senate under serious consideration in the Senate. Next, the governor complained that the members of the legislature were going to get an anticipated COLA adjustment. We moved legislation to suspend the anticipated COLA adjustment and at the same time kept at a level what's called the per diem and the travel allowances. And then lastly, again, where we've worked cooperatively with the governor, we've talked about the absence of the state budget for Illinois, but since Rauner became the governor on 3 occasions, we've done budget making. We've done appropriation bills that he signed 3 times. At the very beginning, he complained that the then budget was out of balance and it needed a correction. We sat down, we talked, negotiated, we exchanged ideas. We sent the bill to the governor. He signed the bill. He lauded the bill today, number one. Number two, later the governor requested that we pass a bill to appropriate federal money, which we did. And in response to his further request, we put money in there for McCormick Place on its bond payments. Lastly, just in December, there was a bill being advanced by Representative Moylan that would have provided appropriation for money which really belonged to local governments. We were prepared to move the bill. The governor gave us a request. add items for the operations of state government. Again, we talked, exchanged ideas, fashioned the bill, sent the bill to the governor, he signed the bill. What's significant in all three instances where these things did happen is at no time did the governor lay down his demand that he get his agenda, which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families and send injured workers' welfare into the emergency room. All three instances. At no time did he lay down that demand. So I think we have a real good prescription for solving our problems, which would be for the governor to take a little different view of what should be done in terms of this agenda that he's got for middle-class families.
Speaker, was there anything that you heard today?
Speaker, is there any scenario you can see where this budget impasse drags beyond November?
Well, you'll recall the legislature passed the budget in May. The legislature passed the budget in May. It was a good spending plan. I publicly acknowledged at the time that we didn't have the money to pay for the budget that we sent to the governor, but we were prepared to negotiate with the governor to find new revenue for the state. I'm still prepared to do that. I would say, as I said earlier, that we need a balanced approach. We need to reduce some spending, and at the same time, we need to raise taxes on the wealthy.
But if he doesn't budge, do you see this dragging past the election?
I hope it doesn't. I mean, I've been prepared to work on these issues since January of 2015.
Did you hear anything today, Speaker?
In his education plan, some people are offset the back in his 10-point.
Sure, I listened to the 10-point description. The staff did a good job in putting that together. We support MAP grants. You know, the Democrats in the legislature support MAP grants. There should be no doubt about that. That's money for poor children to get a college education.
Is there a bill coming? We've been hearing that there's a Democratic bill coming on that soon, separate bill, and maybe the Republicans will have a separate proposal on that as well. 3 o'clock.
Yeah, there will be a bill in House Committee today at 3 o'clock that would appropriate for the MAP grants and for the community colleges.
Speaker, today...
Amanda?
This week, friends of Michael J. Madigan dropped a mailer on Beasley Gonzalez. Your members have primaries or general elections. You strongly encourage them to walk the precincts every day. Have you been walking precincts?
I've done some walking. Yeah, I've been very well received.
Do you plan to continue that?
We're waging a strong campaign in House District 22. We expect to be successful. Yeah.
Speaker, it appears as if, although the effort that you've addressed, the partial privatization of DCEO stalled in the legislature, Ronner says he's filed articles of incorporation to do evidently some form of solely private, or I don't quite know how that will work. What are your thoughts on going that route?
Well, I'd be interested to know what the connection will be with the government. So the way I heard it, he's going to gather together a group outside of the government. I believe that Mayor Emanuel has done this in Chicago. And that's fine as it goes, but then I like to know what will be the connection between this group and what happens over at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.
Mr. Speaker, what's the likelihood that this budget 2016 has to get wrapped into 2017, which is going to start, we're going to hear about next month?
Yeah, that shouldn't happen. It could have been avoided back in May and June when, you know, the governor could have used his power under the Constitution to do a reduction veto, line item veto.
But is it likely now?
Speaker, do you have any comment on CPF's ability to borrow?
I don't think he is. I'm not focused on the personalities. I'm not focused on divide and conquer. I'm focused on these issues. I've spent a great deal of time to understand the issues. I'm prepared to work on the issues. I think they're of great significance. And I think that the longer we wait, the more damage we do. So we've got to get about the business of correcting the fiscal problems at the state of Illinois.
Did you hear anything today that means year 2 is going to be any better? You hear any sort of thing today?
Well, I had a pleasant experience here with the media, so that's encouraging.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, your wife clashed the term limits. What do you think of that?
My wife what?
Clashed when the governor said term limits. So. I have a wonderful wife. Is there a story there?
Next, from Springfield, House Minority Leader Jim Dunkin and Senate Minority Leader Christine Radogno react to the governor's State of the State address.
The governor made a very strong statement today on his vision for Illinois. And after today's speech, I don't think anyone can ever question his resolve to fix our broken state. When you have a divided government, which we have in Illinois, where we have a Republican in the mansion, we have two supermajority Democrats running the chamber, you get things done by compromising, by meeting halfway on the important issues of the day. And I think the governor made a very strong case of how he's willing to continue to work with the Democrats and meet them halfway on important priorities and issues for them. We know full well that the governor has stated long ago that he's willing to work with the Democrats on a budget, and he's willing to sign on to revenue. But he needs something in exchange. He's laid out that list over and over again. I've heard before that the governors from the Democrat leaders, that the governor's proposals go against the core beliefs of his party. Well, as this Republican stands here, it's called a tax increase, kind of goes against the core beliefs of the Republican Party. But we have a Republican governor who's willing to take that step and say, I'm willing to meet the Democrats to get this resolved. But we're not going to pass a tax increase, a budget that has a tax increase with no strings attached, which is what I continue to hear from the Democrats and what the Speaker just stated. So what I was also I thought was very good in what the governor stated today is in his continuation of trying to work with the Democrat majority is that he embraced the Democrat proposal for pension reform. I think it was a very bold move for the governor. Some people have stated in the past that it doesn't go far enough, or some people think it goes too far. But the fact is the Republican governor stated, I'm willing to work and I'm going to get behind that pension bill, as am I. He also stated, which I think is very important on behalf of the Republican governor, that he's willing to work with the Democrats on also a very important issue for them, and that is the funding inequalities of public education in Illinois, something which has been kind of a third-rail issue for decades. But the Republican governor has stated, I am ready to work with the Democrats on that issue, whether it's the city of Chicago, low poverty districts, and also rural districts. I'm prepared to work with him as well. And so, again, today's statement by the governor was very strong. It's a continuation of what he wants to do, which is to meet the Democrats halfway, negotiate on trying to fix the problems that we have, mainly resolving our budget impasse and also moving into the next budget cycle. So I stand ready to work with the governor and also my counterpart, Leader Radogno, to work with the Democrats to resolve the FY16 budget. We do that by meeting, and that's all I have to say for now.
Well, thank you. I think the speech speaks for itself. I found the tone fairly conciliatory, which I think is a good thing given the very charged environment we're in. But if you allow me for a minute, I'd like to address some of what Speaker Madigan said. He found a number of things about this speech interesting. I found a number of things about his response interesting. First of all, he brought in a number of people who are affected by this budget impasse. We all understand there are real consequences for this budget impasse. But what he did say, too, is that he's had some successes, but those successes, the budget fix in 15, criminal justice reform, he had a couple of others, were all successes because they didn't deal with fundamental change, the turnaround agenda, the things that the governor is asking for. I thought it was interesting that he talked about the governor wanting to depress wages of the middle class and send people to the emergency room and into welfare. I didn't hear the governor say that. I heard the governor talk about balancing the public sector and the private sector. Those are out of balance right now. I heard the governor talking about trying to make Illinois competitive, particularly in the area of workers' comp. And I don't know I never heard the word emergency room and pushing people into welfare. So that was quite interesting to me. The speaker also said that he passed an unbalanced budget, and he did. He said he readily admitted that, and he's willing to work on revenue options. That's great. I didn't hear one word about being willing to come together to talk about the things that the governor's talked about in terms of long-term reform for this state. So while the speech was very conciliatory, and certainly the speaker's words were measured as usual, what I saw once again is a brick wall. I'm willing to do it as long as it doesn't impact the status quo and the people that keep me in office whatsoever. So I think that we'll see how this unfolds. I'm pleased to hear about the potential discussion on pension reform, but I'll be quite interested to see where that goes.
Senator Redondo, you may have heard the speaker mention that he was saying the House brought up, and Jim, you maybe want the House brought up property tax some X number of times on a vote, and you guys didn't vote for it.
Terry, that was all about politics. That's gotcha votes for political mailers next year. They were never intended to pass. He knew it. He continued, so he's going to put a press release out that Representative so-and-so voted against property taxes so many times. I've already seen it. That had nothing to do with substance about moving the ball forward and solving the budget. This was just about politics this summer. It was gotcha politics and nothing more than that.
And remember, the point of a property tax freeze is not a freeze for the sake of the freeze, but a freeze giving local governments the tools to be able to conduct their business at less expense to the taxpayers. He never included those items in those votes.
Senator, can you go beyond a little bit of saying you understand Speaker Madigan talking about certain things that have happened, governor laying down his demands? Why is that interesting?
Well, it's interesting to me because I think the message from the speaker is crystal clear. He's willing to talk about things as long as he doesn't have to make any fundamental changes to the status quo. And that's what the governor is asking for. That's what the speech was about today. And as long as those areas don't impact the people that fund and keep one party in control and have got us in the position that we're in, he's fine with it. But he will not touch any area that may make a positive difference for the vast majority of the people of the state of Illinois if it entails really going to the heart of their constituencies.
So as it stands today, are you more or less encouraged, discouraged? I mean, it seems as if you're saying the governor got out there, tried to be more conciliatory, seek middle ground, and then you just heard Madigan.
Let me just say briefly, I think the governor coming out and stating that I am ready to get behind the Democrat president's pension reform bill is a pretty bold statement about how he is looking to find a resolve on issues that are very difficult. And I will tell you, that's not a bill that I think that the governor a year ago would embrace, but in the spirit of cooperation and moving the ball forward, that's a very important issue which he's taken a very dramatic position on, something that's extremely important, but I think that sends a message that this governor is willing to work with the Democrat leaders on probably, that is not, if not the second most important issue that's facing the state of Illinois. But let me just make it perfectly clear. I hear this whole issue about that the governor is seeking to depress the wages and to hurt the middle class. I will say this. For the past 13 years, there's been no Republican who's been in the mansion or has run either chamber. I don't think the middle class was treated very well under the Democrat one-party rule for the past 13 years. This governor talked about increasing wages for the blue-collar workers, not the opposite. I heard the opposite from the speaker. It's not true. So the fact is, they got to stop playing the victim. They put us in this position. They sent that ridiculous budget to the governor, and I applaud the governor for vetoing it because it's an affront upon every Illinoisan.
The governor did talk about state workers make like 30% more than their counterparts in the private sector. You take that as saying that they make too much, or what does that mean?
I don't take that as saying they make too much, but I take that as saying that we need a balance between the people who are paying the state workers and the people who are working in the private sector to make those payments. But if you don't agree that, perhaps there's a difference with the public and private sector, look at other states around us. We have the highest state-paid workers in the entire nation when controlled for inflation. Even without, or rather cost of living, even without that control, we have the third highest paid. So again, it's a matter of balance, it's a matter of equity. Taxpayers cannot continue to give more and more and more and more to advantage a large, but not the majority of the people in this state. There's way more to the middle class.
Well, it seems like we heard about, and you folks are talking about President Cullerton and the governor in some kind of a, if not an alliance, a lot of agreement, and there's one guy, Speaker Madigan, who's kind of left out. I mean, am I right?
No, the water's warm. He can jump in any time. And you know what? I encourage him to. You know, the governor has been working with the speaker on, I think, 2 issues I'm up with in the last few weeks, school funding and also pensions. That's with the president. Speaker, I would just encourage him to get engaged with the governor, speak about those issues. We can talk globally. We can talk about the individual issues, about pension reform, about school funding. But I know those are issues that are important for his members. But again, I can't speak for Mr. Madigan. But when the Democrat president of the Senate is willing to go out and make public statements and say that I'm willing to work with this governor, I'd like to hear more of that from the speaker. That's how we resolve the budget.
I just also want to be careful that we don't overstate the amount of agreement we have. I do give President Cullerton credit for sticking with a potential agreement on pensions despite some miscommunications last week. I do think that he has an interest, and many members in his caucus truly do have an interest in moving the ball forward. We are not there yet. But my hope is that if we can successfully get an agreement on one of these large items, it will pave the way for other agreements.
The door's been open.
On education funding, do you take the governor's words today as an endorsement of the type of plan that's been proposed by President Cullerton and by Senator Benar and that sort of idea of funding?
I do not. I mean, that particular plan, as you're aware, really devastated one area of the state. We cannot help some areas at the expense of others. I know the governor's goal is to be able to add money to education the way we did in '97, so that there are some hold harmless bottoms up approach that will be tricky in the environment that we're in, but I think everyone would like to see an approach like that. And we're willing to work on that with him.
When was the last time there was a meeting between you guys and your counterparts in the Democratic side?
Well, 4 of us met about a month ago.
Yeah.
And not 5. But,
Speaker was not there.
The speaker wasn't present, but before that, there were 2 meetings in December we haven't met.
But let's be clear. Getting 5 people in a room and having a productive meeting are 2 entirely different things. And so I think any way that we can get engagement, whether everybody's sitting in the room or it's through intermediaries or if it's with using staff, is a positive.
Our staff communicates on a daily basis with the majority staff on a variety of issues. So there's no lack of communication. Our staff, both House and the Senate Republican staff, are in a continuous discussion with the Senate staff on a variety of issues that are directives coming from us and also from the governor.
You know, the governor didn't address really the budget head-on. Obviously, I know a budget address is coming up, but with service providers shutting down and such, I don't know, is that a miss that he didn't directly address the impasse situation, not the side programs, but where we're at right now?
No, we're going to be back here in 2 weeks, and I'll give the man his opportunity, governor, his opportunity at that time to talk about where we're at with the budget and also the impasse. I think it was, today is the state of the state. It's not the state of the budget.
Jim, have you had any conversations that you want to talk about with Representative Dunkin as far as leaving the Democratic Party and joining your?
No.
Well, let's say that the situation we're in Illinois isn't very good. The year hasn't been very good. I bet a lot of people would agree with that, so let's start from there. Why would someone who thinks that believe that 2016 is going to be any better or any different?
You know, I'm about the now, about getting this done right now. I'm not going to speculate about what happens in 17. If the Democrats want to play the same game and pass a budget for the 3rd year in a row, which is grossly unbalanced, then do it at their peril. And you know what? Fine, we'll go through a summer session again, and we'll go through a fall session. But I am not going to put my members on an unbalanced budget. I am not going to put my members on a tax increase that comes with no strings attached, which they're asking for. But the fact is, let's get the job done for this right now. Just go back in time a little bit to last spring on the FY15 fix. We didn't create the mess, they created it. The governor inherited a large unbalanced budget. We worked collectively, mainly with Republican votes out of both House and the Senate, to fix the mess that was created the year before by the Democrats. So we can do this again. And you know what? But if we have to go in FY17 under the same path in the same way in which they did last year, so be it. But we're not going to support it. And I would encourage the governor, again, if he's given that same type of bad budget, to veto it outright.
Leader Durkin, you know, the Democrats
Could
have this giant...
respond to it? Could Leader Downey respond to that question too, please?
Sure.
Is this year going to be any different or any better?
Well, I hope it's a lot better, but the fact of the matter is people in the state of Illinois, as they see the uncertainty unfold, are simply throwing up their hands and leaving. There's a lot at stake. Again, the invitation here is to the Democrats, Madigan in particular, to realize that the only way this is going to turn around is if he engages. Apparently, I think Cullerton has seen the wisdom of doing that, at least to some degree, and again, I don't want to overstate it, but I think that's a hopeful sign, and I think there is more common ground than Madigan portrays.
Well, for either of you, President Cullerton said in his speech the other day in Chicago, we're never going to do this stuff on collective bargaining, so the main parts of the turnaround agenda are not going to happen. They have a overwhelming majority of Democrats. So, and the governor really stressed that more last primary instead of general election. What happens? Are you willing, if Madigan doesn't give in on those things, or if Cullerton doesn't give in on those things, to have no budget for the rest of the year, or for 4 years?
My attitude is one step at a time, and I think that there may be some wiggle room on some of the collective bargaining issues, more than they say publicly, in order to keep their constituencies in line. So again, we need not necessarily 5 people in a room, 5 people in a room with some real engagement and discussion about what that would mean, how it would move the state forward, and still be fair to union and non-union members.
Could either of you respond to some people criticizing the governor, saying it wasn't his fault that Illinois was in a bad shape, but they're criticizing him as saying he's trying to do everything in 1 year, that he ought to be trying to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and acknowledge he has 4, maybe 8 in office.
Well, let's start what he did last year. He laid out his reform agenda. What he did is that he went to the legislative leaders stating that his intention to put together working groups, equal part Republicans and Democrats, to find some type of common ground on issues that he laid out in his first State of the State address. We believe that the Democrats were going to work in good faith, but by the middle of May, they just walked away from the negotiations. So there was never really a good faith effort. And at the same time, Republicans were not engaged at all with the budget that was prepared and it was passed by them at the end of May. So I think the governor is, whether he's going about it, you think, too heavy, but this is a man that I think wants to get things done. I don't think kicking the ball down the road, kicking the can down the road, which has happened for year in, year out, is an answer to our problem. So I give him credit for trying to resolve as much as he can. We're adults. We should get the job done. We can do more than just one issue at a time.
Thank you. Thank you. There's like 2 more. Another group.
Chris is yours.
Next, from Springfield, State Representative Kenneth Dunkin remarks on Governor Rauner's State of the State address and speaks out against House Speaker Michael Madigan for being guilty of, in Representative Dunkin's own words, holding the citizens of Illinois hostage over the state budget negotiations.
I'm the state representative. I represent the 5th representative district from Division and LaSalle all the way to Michigan Avenue to 79th Street in Paxton, east of Jeffrey, literally from the Gold Coast to the Soul Coast. So today, the governor delivered his State of the State address, and in spite of what he said, the people of Illinois know the reality, that the state is broken and it needs to be fixed. And partisan politics will not help us fix it. And while I'm encouraged that there seems to be some progress between the Senate president as well as the governor, we still have a long way to go in our very own House of Representatives as we wait on Speaker Michael J. Madigan to decide on when he will stop holding the citizens of Illinois hostage to his political maneuvering and his political shenanigans and actually get business done. It seems as if everyone wants a solution except one person. One person. The Senate president and the governor are talking. Speaker Michael J. Madigan is not talking. He's the big impasse at this point because he's ignoring to connect and meet with the governor. So, everyday constituents who come to my office asking, what are we doing? What's the plan? They deserve to know. They deserve to know that we don't need to be merely voting on legislation that impacts special interests, which is about 7% of the people, while the rest of the state continues to slide off of the fiscal cliff. It's as though we're living in an alternative reality, a bizarre world of sorts, if you will, where we hope that if we continue to ignore the crisis, that it'll go away. And you know as well as I do, it won't. Well, guess what? This mess is not going to go away. And if only the only thing that we're doing is saying no to the governor's plan while providing no alternatives, no plan of our own, then we are being just as irresponsible. We're not holding true to the oath of office that we took to act in the best interests of the citizens of this great state of Illinois. I'm calling on all of my Democratic House members, all of my colleagues, to get together in a room and draft our own budget that reflects the true ideas and values of the Democratic Party and the state of Illinois. Let's lock ourselves in a room. Let's bring our soap. We can bring our water. We can take a shower in the Speaker's private suite, in his private bathroom. I'm ready with our water, with our soap, with my sleeping bag, with my backpack to stay until we get the job done. Things are not perfect for all of the citizens, but one thing that is common is that everybody is hurting. Literally from those who are suffering with homemaker services that need to be delivered to our seniors, to the developmentally disabled, to the individuals who need child care assistance right now, to those students who for no fault of their own are struggling along with their families to go back to school because they're not in there now. They have to leave because there's no monetary award monies. There's no MAP. The colleges and universities that we fund with your public dollars, they haven't received them. That's a major issue. So I don't want to come down here just to listen to a speech or to talk about the problems. We're all here right now. Those of us in the House, those of us in the Senate, those of us Democrats, those of us who are Republican. Again, the President of the Senate, the governor, have come up with some form of agreement. They're at least communicating and talking. One person, one man who has continued a political shenanigan or sort of process of what it is that he thinks will be effective during election time is not working. He's the only one that's outside of the room that doesn't want to talk, that wants to play this waiting game at the expense of all of the citizens across the state. And I say enough. Thank you. Yes. Items. Well, these are not props. This is real water. This is real soap. It's a real backpack. This is a real sleeping bag. This is a real backpack with items here that'll sustain me for as long as it takes to at least start talking with our colleagues, our Democratic colleagues. We know we stand strong with working families across this state. We want to make sure that businesses get an opportunity to stay open and active and recruit business so people can get off of subsidies. Like I grew up on public welfare. I had a place to go to work growing up in Cabrini Green. Businesses were there, small business, medium businesses. What are we doing? Why are we going home? Are we still waiting on Mike Madigan in the House of Representatives? He's the only one that has not connected or met with the governor. And that's supposed to be all of our problem. And we rank and file members, the rest of the 117 of us, sit there and just say, okay, Mr. Speaker, we know you haven't articulated a plan. We know there is no alternative or option outside of the governor's plan. We know we're supposed to just say no to whatever he says. But what is our plan? We have not stopped taxing the citizens of Illinois at the sales register. We have not stopped taxing folk at the income level, at the fee level, but we've stopped doing our job. We should not hold citizens in this state hostage to Mike Madigan's political shenanigans. I want to be a part of a solution. I am so past this partisan politics that it's pathetic. Give me a plan, another option outside of the governor's, other than saying no to the governor. What is the next move? What's the plan to get the homemakers back in servicing our senior citizens who need the services? What's the plan in terms of funding these public schools? Chicago is in a calamitous situation. And it is a travesty, it would be a travesty for us to allow the Chicago public school system to close, for teachers to walk out of the classrooms. It's an equally horrific experience to live in some of these violent communities where we know that kids and parents are suffering and under siege. And all we have to do is fund after-school programs. All we have to do is come up with job training dollars, and that's going to impact young folk, older folk who may be going through a job transition or career transition. But Mike Madigan is the only person who is not in the room today. And because so many of my colleagues, upstate, downstate, city of Chicago, suburban, Collier County, Democrats, are afraid to take him on and challenge him and tell him to come up with a solution that includes all of us instead of being dictated to. That's what I'm just fed up with. But again, I am prepared to stay here with my backpack, with my sleeping bag, to stay here, lock the doors for as long as we need to. We can shower in Mike Madigan's private bathroom and shower that the citizens pay for and get some work done. I'm prepared to stay.
We're hearing a lot about who's aligned with whom and what cohesion is. Oh, the governor's the governor. Oh, the governor's not. What's that? You know, big place, a lot of people going on. My question is, where does Dunkin fit into all this?
I sit in this, I fit in this, I'm about this, about the people before politics. People in Danville, Illinois, in Rockville, Illinois, in Chicago, people who are struggling, people who don't have the access to come to Springfield or to hire a lobbyist, they can care less who's a Democrat or who's a Republican. People in this state want a budget. This is not about me. This is about the citizens getting what we're supposed to deliver to them. So I'm for the people. And whatever we need to do to get a budget done is what I stand for, is what I believe in. And I'm not going away until we come up with some resolution that puts people before politics, not party. So I work for the citizens in the 5th District. I don't work for the governor. I don't work for Mike Madigan. I work for the citizens in the state of Illinois who I took the oath of office to do my job and to deliver those services. I'm a product of some of the greatest social service programs here in this state. I'm a product of the great institutions in the schools here, of the job opportunity. I benefited from the great museums, from after-school programs, from summer jobs. I am 100% in this for the people. You know, the short answer for that is the special interests under the direction of Speaker Madigan has been all out against me because I'm off of the political plantation of the Democratic Party here in the state of Illinois. And that's a new paradigm shift for many Democrats. There's nowhere in the world that we should be having political conversations over the people in the state of Illinois. That's the only reason we don't have a state budget. Well, I am not speaking on behalf of the Black Caucus. I'm saying, well, the question for any member, whether they're black, white, or brown, what's our plan to negotiate with each other as members? The Senate President is talking to the governor. Why isn't he talking to the governor? Other part of it is we're all duly elected in our respective districts, just like the Speaker is. We have ideas. There are a tremendous amount of intelligent people here in this state who are in the General Assembly. We can figure things out. We know how to balance a checkbook. We know how to craft together a solid program. Community members out there who are smarter than us, or just as smart as us at the very least, can come up with solutions that impact citizens across the state. So I don't speak for the Black Caucus. I'm speaking on as a Democratic member of the House Caucus under this dome in Springfield, where we have not been doing our job except waiting on Michael J. Madigan to stop playing his political games at the expense of the citizens, all the citizens in the state of Illinois. That has absolutely nothing to do with anything. As an independent thinking elected official who happens to be a Democrat, I want to jump to the party that's going to make the most sense, and that's the people of the state of Illinois. So I'm a Democrat. I just happen to be able to think on my own as an independent. Let me say this here. The votes that I've taken or not taken has nothing to do with Michael Madigan. Number one. The second thing is talking with the governor to release the child care services money, the developmentally disabled monies, as well as senior citizens who need home care services. It has nothing to do with the Democrat or Republican anything. That has nothing to do with resolving the budgetary crisis here in this state. My question is, there are 117 of us in the room, there are 71 Democrats, but yet we're sitting there with no plan, no solution. We're waiting on one person to do it for us. Shame on us. So when it comes to helping the kids not have their doors shut in the city of Chicago or across this state, or to keep these nursing homes open or these hospitals open, or making sure there's salt on the roads and other areas of government that we take for granted, that's the party that I'm with. People over politics. Do I have to? Thank you. Well, listen. I want you to think about this for a minute. Here it is, you have 71 Democrats in the House of Representatives, 41 in the Senate. And here it is, we can't come up with forcing the Speaker to come up with a plan or come up with our own plan. And I'm not disrespecting my members. The fact is, this is month 7. And we're waiting on Speaker Madigan to move. We don't do anything else unless he moves. That's a plantation mentality to me. That's why I said, listen, if I can talk to this governor and convince him to release money for child care services, homemaker services, senior citizens, as well as the developmentally disabled, that's a win for the people. So with all this great intelligentsia of state representatives and state senators, we have to make sure that we are sitting in the room together collectively, maybe locked in the room and try to figure this thing out. That's it. So it's, that word is offensive, but what's even more atrocious is us not having a state budget and disrespecting every single citizen here who gets up and go to work and they do their job, unlike some of us down here. So I'm all about the people getting what they're supposed to get and what I took the oath of office for. If anyone else who is not a part of that situation and just listening to one man, Michael J. Madigan, I have a problem with that. So it's not about a Republican or Democrat or the governor. It's about what in the world, what in the hell it is that we need to do to get our act together to pass a state budget. And the first thing you do is to start communicating with each other and start talking. And if you don't like the governor's plan, let's come up with our own plan. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Education has never been more challenging in Illinois than it is right now, with comprehensive education reform recently passed by lawmakers and our state's financing of education remaining under pressure. That's why the Illinois Principals Association acts to represent the needs of students and our members. We keep our principals up to date on changes in the law affecting education policy, and we advocate to keep our schools safe and to maintain a healthy environment conducive to learning. With all the changes happening in every field and with the ongoing financial problems facing Illinois, it's vital we all know about changes affecting our lives. That's why the Illinois Principals Association is proud to be a part of the Illinois Channel's Advisory on Education. Their coverage, whether that of key lawmakers discussing changes in education, an interview with the Illinois Budget Director on the state's finances, or the one-on-one interviews with those working in education, all help to keep citizens across the state connected to the real issues that impact the education of our children. I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. I'm also proud to say I serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
From the City Club of Chicago, State Senate President John Cullerton delivers an address entitled Funding Our Schools, Time for a Turnaround.
Thank you very much, Jay. First thing I'd like to do is introduce and reintroduce members of the largest Senate caucus, Republican or Democrat, in the United States. So my colleagues, as I call your name out, please stand. No particular order of importance, except for the fact that I'd like to tell you that I'm endorsing this man who's running for the U.S. Senate, State Senator Napoleon Harris. Napoleon. State Senator John Mulrow from the northwest side of Chicago. John? There's a guy who's got a primary, so he's a little anxious, so he introduced himself already. State Senator Mike Hastings. There's another senator who's got a primary. She's a little anxious. She stood up. Her name is State Senator Patricia Van Pelt. One of our leaders, Terry Link, Senator Terry Link. From Lake County, Senator Belinda Bush. All the way from Central Illinois, who used to be my chief of staff, now he's a great senator from Central Illinois, Andy Manar. Andy Manar is here. State Senator Daniel Biss is here. Daniel. Another one of our leaders, Maddie Hunter. Maddie, there you are. The state senator in the district right next to mine, Heather Staines. Heather Staines is here, right? Oh, Heather, how are you? I hope I pronounce her name correctly. This is a state senator. Her name is Iris Martinez. The guy who's second in seniority in the Senate, Donnie Trotter, Senator Donnie Trotter. Another leader, a leader in education, Senator Lightford. Kimberly Lightford's here. And also State Senator Julie Morrison's here. Julie? Now, by the way, all of those senators voted for me for President of the Senate. I'd like to introduce a senator who didn't vote for me. Senator Michael Connolly from Naperville. We're joined by another special person today. I might be the President of the Senate, but I'm honored to have in attendance the Speaker of my House, my wife, Pam Cullerton. So it's been 7 years since I stood here as the new Senate President, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. We removed a corrupt governor from office. We abolished the death penalty. We officially recognized marriage equality. We reformed pensions for new hires. We kept conventions coming to McCormick Place, and we controlled Medicaid spending. Presented with problems, we've risen to the task to make Illinois a better state that recognizes everyone's rights and provides pathways to excellence. But there's more to do. There's an injustice we've tolerated too long, one that crushes dreams, stifles growth, and keeps us as a state from moving forward. It is Illinois' system of funding public schools. a system that shackles poor communities to poor expectations, while rewarding the affluent even with even greater resources. It can be tolerated no longer. At a time when we seem to label every problem a crisis, let me be clear. Our broken school funding formula is the defining crisis of our time. Fixing it is the turnaround our state truly needs. Today, I'll show you what's wrong with the system, point to states that appear to do it right, and outline ways to make education better and more equitable here. Our students, parents, teachers, and taxpayers are tired of the bickering, tired of the impasse. They're looking for leaders with the courage to step beyond the status quo and to do what's right. Today, I'm asking my colleagues to take that step. Our problems are not a secret. For nearly 20 years, the system has festered in broad daylight. Every morning across Illinois, school children learn, teachers teach, and principals lead. But the doors of opportunity do not open as wide for students in some schools as in others, even as our expectations and demands rise equally across all schools. In Berwyn, a kindergartner bundles up for class because his aging school can drop below 40 degrees even with the heat on. And he wonders if his favorite books will get ruined like the last time the pipes burst and flooded the school library. In Sandoval, a town about 100 miles south of Springfield, third graders head to school where dwindling resources mean no art classes or foreign language programs. There's no school librarian to help find books or school social worker to offer support. And in East Aurora, the school's social workers serve 900 students each. More than half of East Aurora's 1,100 incoming freshmen read below grade level. The task of improving scores falls to just 2 reading specialists. These situations have nothing to do with the capacity of our kids or the caliber of our educators, and everything to do with how we fund our public schools. Our state has the most inequitable system of school finance in the country. Let me repeat that. Our state has the most inequitable system of school finance in the country. We give less to the students who need more and cover barely a third of the total cost of public education when most states cover half. Let me put it this way. If the National Football League operated like our school funding system, the Super Bowl champ would be guaranteed the top draft pick. It's fundamentally unfair. I believe that our students, all of them, deserve better. Providing it, however, will not be easy. There's a reason why the current school funding formula has been in place for 2 decades. It's hard to change an entrenched status quo. It requires true, dedicated leadership. The question is whether today's leaders are up to the task. Nearly 20 years ago, Governor Jim Edgar staked his legacy on correcting this wrong. He came within a single vote of delivering a complete overhaul of school funding. But at the end of the day, one of the most popular governors in Illinois history was stymied by selfish regional politics within his own party. No governor since, not Ryan Blagojevich nor Quinn, even bothered to try. So I'm here to issue a challenge to Governor Rauner. Since he wants to turn around Illinois, there's no better place to start than the state system for funding public schools. There is no worse status quo. Shouldn't all of our children have access to equal opportunities regardless of zip code or tax bracket? Shouldn't our system prioritize getting rid of hurdles that prevent children from getting a quality education? The world has changed over the past 20 years. Shouldn't our school funding system change with it? Look around. This room is filled with successful people. Is there anyone here who doesn't owe his or her success to education? The strength of our public schools is vital for the civic, economic, and social strength of our state. Unfortunately, our state's not doing so well. The performance gap that divides our rich and poor students, as well as our students of color, ranks among the worst in the nation. You begin to see it in lagging fourth grade reading scores among low-income students. From there, those students increasingly fall behind their peers at schools with greater resources. Nationally, we rank a dismal 42nd in terms of the performance gap in reading scores among these students. Our state falls among the bottom 10 when it comes to the achievement gap between black and white students. And while we suffer the status quo, other states are moving the needle further and faster than we are. We know that students in disadvantaged communities are just as capable of achieving educational excellence as those from the best neighborhoods. We just need to invest a little more to make up the difference. And the earlier we do it, the better. Just about everyone else gets this. Look at Ohio. Ohio is the polar opposite of what we're doing for schools here. Ohio invests heavily in lower income students and schools because officials there understand the investment pays off. The higher the level of education, the lower the reliance on government social programs, the lower the unemployment rate, the higher the wages, and the more attractive your schools, communities, and states become. But it's not just Ohio. Every state does it better than us. For every dollar Ohio spends on students, $1.22 is invested in low-income students. On the flip side, for every dollar Illinois spends educating students, only 81 cents goes towards low-income students. I think it's time to turn that around. Remember, Governor Rauner vetoed all of our budget proposals except for one. He signed the public education budget, and he described it as his greatest accomplishment, even though not a single Republican lawmaker voted for it. He champions what he calls world record spending for Illinois schools. But we have to ask ourselves two questions. How much are we going to spend on education, and how are we going to spend it? If the money isn't going to help students in need, it doesn't really matter how much we spend. That's why our funding formula needs to be overhauled. The current system tends to exacerbate rather than alleviate problems. That's how we can spend record amounts on schools and still rank among the lowest in the nation in terms of the state support for education funding. It results in some schools building up reserves large enough to cover years' worth of spending, while others could barely last the week. So how do we create a new funding formula to better serve today's kids? The new approach should reflect some key principles. State resources should go to school districts based on the needs of their students, with more funds to support kids who we know from research and our own common sense need extra support. We're talking about kids who live in poverty, have special learning needs, or who are just learning the English language. The challenges confronting East St. Louis, where 99% of kids are poor, are different than in Lake Forest, where less than 4% of kids are low income. Let's create a school funding formula that acknowledges that. Funds should be distributed through a single, straightforward model. Special deals are over. This will be welcome relief for districts that confront one bureaucratic hurdle after another. We need to take into account a school district's ability to support local schools with local funds, and accountability needs to follow these dollars. So guided by these key principles, a new school funding formula would level the playing field that has gotten so off kilter. Now clearly, no one wants any school district to lose money. We all understand that dollars for schools are dollars for students. But let's acknowledge that while there may be some concerns about winners and losers in a new system, there are winners and far too many losers in the current system. We cannot continue to dither while some districts are funded at double and triple the state average, while others have to convert maintenance closets into art rooms and cut world language and technology. Why should a high schooler in Elgin get a $12,000 a year education, while 30 miles away, a high schooler in Niles gets a $22,000 a year public education, even, by the way, as Elgin taxes itself 22% higher than the state average? It's not lost on me that we are sitting in Chicago as I speak about an Illinois school funding fix. You might wonder what all this could mean for the public schools in Chicago. Chicago needs help, quickly. That much is clear. The school funding formula we are proposing could help, not resolve, but help some of the financial challenges for Chicago. And here's how. First, a single school funding formula that recognizes the needs of low-income students would benefit Chicago just as it would benefit Berwyn or Cairo or East St. Louis, all of which would have a student poverty rate at nearly 90% or higher. Districts with the same level of need would be treated the same. Again, any special deals are gone. Second, the Chicago Public School District is the only district in Illinois that pays almost all of its own pension cost. That takes local dollars out of local classrooms. This year, Illinois is spending $2,266 per student on pensions in school districts outside Chicago. In Chicago, the state spends $31 per student. Local taxpayers pick up the rest. So it's time to treat the public schools in Chicago like every other school district in Illinois. Pension parity must be part of the new formula. And speaking of Chicago, remember that world record education budget the governor signed? It increased school spending by $265 million statewide. I was recently in central Illinois, and I asked a group how much of that extra money they thought went to Chicago. And they said, all of it went to Chicago. And then I went back here in my own district, and I asked the same question. The response was, well, whatever it wasn't enough. Do you want to know how much more Chicago schools got out of that extra $265 million? Minus $60 million. Under the school aid formula, we increased the appropriation by $265 million. Chicago's total take went down by $60 million. Does anyone here think that improves education for Chicago students? That's the problem with the current formula. The dollars aren't going where we know they are needed. And we know Chicago kids, by the way, can perform as well as any. According to a recent U.S. Department of Education national report card, Chicago students improved in math and reading faster than other urban schools and the nation at large. That's great. So why is there a sense of surprise? Is it because we all know that too many of those kids in Chicago face nearly impossible odds and often lack the basic resources needed to attain educational success? Okay, then shouldn't we do something about it? Chicago students are our students. We have the same responsibility to them that we have to every public school student in Illinois. We cannot applaud their accomplishments and then turn our back on their shortcomings. Their turnaround agenda is our turnaround agenda and needs to be Illinois' top priority. I hope you will join me in making that happen. Thank you once again for the opportunity for me to speak to you. I'm not going to take any questions.
I think you'll take this one. Okay, here we go. With Mr. Dr. Lustig, with so many social service agencies on the brink of closing, can anything be done to assist the state's most vulnerable? Let's try and have questions about education, okay? Okay, go ahead.
Well, obviously there's a question about our budget. So, real briefly, we passed the budget. The governor vetoed it except for the education funds. In the meantime, there's court orders, continuing appropriations, and 90% of our budget is being paid out. 10% is not. The big problem is that we're spending at the level that's about $6 billion more than we have coming in. The governor has not agreed to supporting the budget and making up the difference until we pass some of his turnaround agenda items. And that's been the nature of the problem. In the Senate, the senators here, the Democratic senators know we have a working supermajority and we can override the governor. The House does not. So that's where the impasse is. And we continue to be willing to sit down and talk to the governor about his turnaround agenda, but we would ask him to understand that it's not just the Democrats who are in charge of the budget in Illinois. He's the governor. He's in charge of it along with us, and we have to resolve it. It's been 8 months without having a budget, and social service programs are suffering. High school counselors are telling the seniors not to go to school in Illinois because we haven't funded our schools. We have a growing deficit. We have been downgraded, and that is not a business-friendly environment, in my opinion. So that's the status. Eager to hear what the governor's plans are on Wednesday in describing the state, but it's in bad shape, and we want to change it.
What compliment would you have given the governor had you seen him yesterday? That's a City Club question, by the way.
Well, look, it could be worse. You know, I think our governor is open to working on our budget. I think the governor has indicated publicly and privately, certainly, that he's willing to be for compromises involving revenue. And so when it comes to whenever we can resolve the issues that he needs to be resolved on his turnaround agenda, when we come to solving the problems of our budget, I think he's going to be open to it. I believe that we will be able to come to some agreement on a constitutional pension reform. We do have a great state. You know, we have to remind ourselves with all this dysfunction in the government, we have a great state. We have a state that has folks who are highly educated. We make more money here in Illinois than all the states around us. I personally think that's a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. We have a great transportation system. We have great weather. Well, okay, I'm just kidding about that. So the fact is that we're going to be, once we get past this, this incredible hang-up that we didn't see coming, things are going to get better. And so in that regard, I think the governor is open-minded, and I'd say he's got some we would call them obsessions that we have to get over. Once we do that, I think I'm going to be very positive, and we're going to bring things together.
Okay. Question from Robin Staines. Education's clearly a critical issue, but politically challenging. What are the odds fixing the formula in the midst of this broader political challenge?
The governor has linked things together. We don't have a budget because he's got his turnaround agenda. So I can link things together, too. This is a turnaround agenda. We got to change the school funding formula. You guys know how bad it is? So, and you know, before we appropriate money for education for next year, that starts July 1st, we have to fix this formula. And it's not a special deal for Chicago. In fact, we're eliminating the special deals for Chicago. Chicago has 2 special deals. They don't get any money from the pension system. That's a special deal. And they have a special block grant that we can eliminate as long as we have a new fair formula. So I'm making it a top priority. This is a bipartisan effort. There are many, many more school districts that in Republican state Senate districts that are losers under the current system than the opposite. So the majority of Republicans in the Senate, I don't know about Senator Connolly's district, but in others, there are some real districts that are very similar, if not worse off than Chicago. So we're talking about a formula that affects the entire state, a uniform formula, and one that acknowledges the fact that we have not been focusing money on the great concentrations of poverty that we have. We're the worst in the nation at the formula, and we're one of the worst in providing support from the state. Those two together are just toxic.
Okay, rather unique question form we have here, but we have 2 questions on health, and then we have 1 more on education, and then the moderator has a short question. This is from Juliet Birnbaum, parent of 3 CPS kids. Oh, yeah, thought you had a stake in this. Okay. Couple of quick ones. How will a bill be brought? When will a bill be brought? How can we pressure lawmakers to support it? Pretty direct.
Okay, so I know that this question comes from one of my constituents. We have a great public school system in Chicago, in my district. I can only speak for my district, okay? We have great schools. And folks in our district are mobile. they can get up and leave. And when someone says the word bankruptcy, when it's so irresponsibly thrown out, I am offended. We're not gonna do that, okay? And so we are gonna fix Chicago's funding formula problems when we fix the entire state's formula, and I don't see why any school should be funded until all the schools are fairly funded, and that's my answer.
You know, City Club rules, you're always allowed one mulligan. This is your mulligan. From Don Schollenberger, right in front. It seems the only answer to solving the state budget problem is for Governor Rauner to cave in to Speaker Madigan. Your thoughts?
Hey,
No,
I read them.
No, that's just not true. First of all, the Speaker and I are similar. Our caucuses are similar in terms of our positions. We're willing to negotiate with the governor. And we would just characterize the governor's request as being extreme or radical. He wasn't in government before. I'll just give you an example. He comes in and one of his main things is to reform the workers' comp system. Well, he wasn't aware of the fact that we made major workers' comp changes 4 years ago. There's been a dramatic drop in workers' comp premiums. The workers' comp premiums, for example, are half of what they were 20 years ago and 19% lower than what they were 4 years ago. Well, he didn't know that, okay? And so, he ran on the pledge that he was going to fix workers' comp reform. So we're willing to talk to him about that topic, but we're not going to upend the entire system. That's one example. The other is the governor thinks that apparently that the problem in Illinois is that the unions are too powerful and that as a result, you know, the teachers are just making too much money. That's what the problem is. So he wants to take away their right to negotiate. We're not going to do that. And so when we get to the point where we just sit down and work through the topic of collective bargaining, sure. The topic of workers' comp, sure. The Speaker and I are organized in that regard. Now, I must say, the governor didn't spend $1 million against me saying in statewide ads that I was a crook. So that's a strange way to start your negotiations, you know, when you want to see if you can work out a deal. So maybe there's a little bit more animus there between the Speaker and the governor. But I just want to sit down and work with them. Everybody in my caucus and the Republicans know I like to work things out, and we're willing to do that. And it's getting to the point, though, where we can't go much longer without an agreement. So let's do it.